In this video, I'll be putting every Minecraft enchantment against each other to find out which one truly is the best. I'll be taking two enchantments and have to decide which one is better. The better one will advance and the worst one will be eliminated. And I'll do this until there is only one enchantment left, which will be crowned the official best enchantment in all of Minecraft. And now let's take our first two enchantments. First up, we have Efficiency versus Fortune. Now these are two pretty high tier enchantments, with Efficiency making the blocks you break faster, and Fortune giving you more of certain items you mine, and also increasing chances of special items like flint or saplings dropping from blocks. Fortune can only go up to a level 3 enchantment, while Efficiency goes all the way up to a level 5, so that already gives Efficiency an advantage in this comparison. But I don't want to undersell Fortune, because if you're out mining, then 9 out of 10 times you'll probably want Fortune on your pickaxe rather than Efficiency. But still, even with that, Efficiency is useful on pretty much any tool, while Fortune is really only good for pickaxes. I think Efficiency is just an all-around great enchantment, and for that, Fortune will be eliminated and Efficiency will be advancing. Alright, next up, Power versus Punch, the two bow enchantments that, if you're like me, will sometimes get these two mixed up. But putting that aside, this specific comparison will be a pretty hard one because these are two extremely strong enchantments. On the one hand, you have Power, which increases arrow damage, meanwhile Punch is essentially knockback for your bow, where arrows will knock entities and players back actually pretty far. Okay, but which one is better? Well, my first reaction would probably be that Power is better. I mean, arrows doing more damage is simply more practical. But the more I thought about it, I started leaning more towards Punch, and the reason for that is because although Punch only goes up to a max level of 2, Punch is incredibly strong. I mean, a fully charged bow shot will have people absolutely flying. So really the purpose of Punch is that it turns the bow from a weapon designed for killing and turns it into a better version of knockback, designed to keep enemies at a distance. It really turns the bow into a different tool altogether, while Power just makes your bow stronger. Don't get me wrong, these are both incredible enchantments, but I think Punch, for all its untapped potential, will be advancing and Power will be getting eliminated. Now we got Looting versus Bane of Arthropods, and well, no hate to Bane of Arthropods, but this really isn't a comparison. I mean, looting is useful in pretty much any circumstance, with the increased drops from mobs and even increased XP. Meanwhile, Bane of Arthropods will kill a spider. Looting advances. Next up, Blast Protection versus Projectile Protection. Now, Blast Protection is good because it will decrease the damage you take from things like TNT, beds in the nether, or mainly creeper explosions. Meanwhile, Projectile Protection has you covered from almost anything ranged, like arrows, tridents, blazes, fireballs, stuff like that. And while Blast Protection is good, think about how many times you're actually ever getting blown up compared to how many times you're getting shot at. I think the only time Blast Protection would be better than Projectile Protection is in a hardcore world to protect you from rogue creepers. But for almost every other occasion, I think Projectile Protection is just more useful, so Blast Protection is eliminated and Projectile Protection advances. Alright, now Multi-Shot versus Quick Charge, two crossbow enchantments that on the surface both seem pretty good, but when you look a little deeper, they might not be all that amazing. So what do I mean by that? Well, looking at Multi-Shot, it seems amazing, right? You fire one arrow and 3 come out of the crossbow. You're getting 3 arrows for the price of 1. What's not to love here? Well, that's great on paper, but in practice, when you try to shoot anything with Multi-Shot, 1 arrow will hit the target, 1 will miss completely, and 1 will maybe hit a wall if you're fortunate. I think Multi-Shot would be better if the arrows were just a little closer together instead of being so spread out. But okay, Multi-Shot might not be the best, but what's wrong with Quick Charge? Well, there's nothing specifically bad about Quick Charge, but I just feel like the crossbow isn't made to be spammed. That's more the bow's strong suit. Now don't get me wrong, neither of these enchantments are useless or anything, and trust me, we'll be getting to some way worse ones, but for me, these enchantments are just not as good as I think they can be. Overall though, I think Quick Charge does have the slight edge here, so Quick Charge will be advancing. Next is Fire Protection versus Curse of Binding, and I think we all know what the answer will be here for this, but to be fair to Curse of Binding, it's not completely useless. I mean, you could use it to, okay, maybe it's not useful for much. But Fire Protection, on the other hand, is a very strong enchantment, especially if you're going to the nether, so I'd say pretty easily Fire Protection will be advancing. Sticking with the fire theme, up next we got Fire Aspect versus Sweeping Edge. These are two sword exclusive enchantments and are both pretty useful, but in different ways. Fire Aspect will set anything you hit with your sword on fire, which is useful not only for doing extra damage, but also because it will drop cooked meat from mobs that will normally drop them raw, which is extremely helpful in my opinion. awesome. But Sweeping Edge is also no joke either, which increases the damage of your sword's sweep attack, which is useful for killing anything in a close group. Now the problem with Sweeping Edge is that every sword already has the sweep attack by default. The enchantment just makes it more powerful, unlike Fire Aspect, which turns your sword into a full-on flaming blade. So for that, I think Fire Aspect advances. Alright, next is Lure versus Luck of the Sea. Now, these are two great enchantments, and I'd be happy to have either one of them on my fishing rod, but sadly I have to choose one, so let's find out which. So Lure does exactly what it promises. It simply lures fish to your rod much faster than usual, while Luck of the Sea on the other hand makes what you do catch more valuable on average. So the end goal of these two enchantments are really the same thing. They help you catch better stuff, they just have two different ways of doing it. But if you look into it, Luck of the Sea really doesn't increase chances of catching something good by that much, at least not as much as I thought it did. And it also decreases the chance of catching a fish by 0.5%, which is such a small percent it probably doesn't matter, but might be a problem if you're fishing for, well, actual fish. So I do think Lure is slightly better, and fishing with Lure also gives you more enjoyment since you're catching fish more regularly. So overall, even though it's close, I think Lure will be advancing. Now Swift Sneak versus Soul Speed, two movement-based enchantments that have very specific purposes. Swift Sneak of course will allow you to move much faster, almost disturbingly fast when sneaking, and Soul Speed will give you a massive speed boost whenever you walk on Soul Sand or Soul Soil. Now Soul Speed pretty much just has one place where it could be useful, and that's in the Nether. And don't get me wrong, when Soul Speed does hit, it really hits, but how often are you really walking on Soul Sand or Soil for this to take up an entire enchantment slot on your boots? But either way, turning over to Swift Sneak now, I also don't think this has the best wide appeal either. I mean, I don't think myself or anyone has really ever had the desire to sneak faster, so I can't see why this enchantment might be annoying to some people. I mean, a big purpose of the sneak mechanic is to move slower to be more accurate when placing blocks or anything else, and Swift Sneak sorta destroys that purpose. Although there are some instances where I can see Swift Sneak coming in handy, such as avoiding the Warden, which I'm pretty sure is the main reason why Mojang added it to the game in the first place. Another way I could see Swift Sneak being useful is if you're trying to stealthily escape people chasing you, and it would help you sneak away faster. And I'm sure there is also hundreds of other ways it could be useful that I'm not thinking of. Meanwhile, Soul Speed really only has one or two uses. So I guess that Swift Sneak will be advancing. Next up, Channeling versus Impaling. So Channeling is an enchantment that will allow lightning to strike on any mob or player that a trident is thrown at, but only while a thunderstorm is happening. And while at first this seems like a very specific enchantment, it can be useful for things like turning creepers into charged creepers or turning mushrooms from red to brown. Although you can also just do that with a well-placed lightning rod, but channeling definitely makes things easier. Now as for Impaling, this enchant is also used on tridents to do extra damage to any water mobs. So things like fish, squids, guardians, mobs like that. And also on Bedrock Edition, Impaling is even better because it will do extra damage to any mob that's in any amount of water, even just standing in the rain. If a mob has just an atom-sized drop of H2O somewhere on its body, then Impaling will happily do extra damage. Now, because I have to pick one of them, I will say that Channeling is cool and can be very fun to play around with the lightning, but Impaling is an essential enchantment for almost any trident. So overall, Impaling is advancing. Now I guess we got a water theme going on because next is Aqua Affinity versus Respiration, the two helmet enchantments that I sort of get mixed up a lot. But either way, Aqua Affinity when put on a helmet will allow you to mine faster underwater, while Respiration will allow you to stay underwater longer without needing to refill your air bubbles. Now it's really hard to pick between these two enchantments because if you need one, you'll probably also need the other one. If you want to do some mining underwater with Aqua Affinity, then you'll probably want to also stay underwater longer, which requires Respiration. But I do think that one of these has a significant advantage, and that is that you could always find easy ways to regain breath while underwater. But no matter what, if you're underwater, mining will always be slower, so Aqua Affinity just narrowly beats out Respiration and advances. Next up, Flame versus Infinity, and I gotta say, these two are some of the best enchantments in the game, let alone just for your bow. With Flame basically being fire aspect for your arrows, and Infinity of course letting you shoot infinite arrows as long as you have just at least one in your inventory. Now the winner here is obvious to just about anyone, but I don't want to understate that Flame really is a great enchantment. Being able to rain down flaming arrows at a distance is just so powerful. But for the winner, I mean, come on, Infinity is just too good, especially if you're like me and don't like wasting arrows. Infinity comes in absolutely clutch, and without a doubt, Infinity advances. Alright, now Smite versus Piercing. So I know that Smite is a little bit of a meme for being useless, but I think for this comparison, it's actually the opposite. Like, when has Piercing ever been useful? I mean, has anyone ever shot through a mob and hit another mob in a completely natural environment? Yeah, Smite might not be the best, especially compared to some other sword enchantments we'll be getting to, but Piercing just seems like a gimmick to me, something that seems like it would be useful on paper, but really never is. So this might be a hot take, but I think I'm gonna go with Smite to advance. Now, while Smite versus Piercing might have been a little controversial, this one won't be. Hopefully. Thorns versus Curse of Vanishing. Yeah, you know, back when I compared Curse of Binding, I did somewhat try to make a case for Binding, but I just don't think I could do that here. Curse of Vanishing is just not defendable. Thorns is advancing. Now, Loyalty versus Riptide. These are both Trident enchantments and both have a max level of 3, and I'm just gonna say it, okay, I love Riptide. Being able to fly through the air as long as there's a little bit of water on your feet is just so satisfying. But Loyalty is also really good too. I mean, it turns the Trident's throwing feature from a relatively risky move to just a fun attack you could spam without worrying about losing your Trident. So these really might be one of the hardest comparisons of this whole tournament, but there could only be one winner here. Now, personally, I really want to and would go with Riptide, but objectively, I think Loyalty is the better enchantment overall. So I'm sorry, Riptide, but Loyalty advances. Up next, Protection versus Frostwalker. Now, Protection needs no introduction. It's the absolute classic armor enchantment that pretty much everyone tries to get maxed out. And Frostwalker is an enchantment that can only be applied to boots that will make water sources you walk near turn into ice, which surprisingly is more useful than you think a lot of the time, and it will even protect you from things like magma blocks and campfire damage when you walk over them. But still, compared to Protection, yeah, there's really no contest here. Protection absolutely decimates Frostwalker and advances. Next is Depth Strider versus Feather Falling, the enchantment that makes you move faster underwater and the enchantment that makes you not need water when you are falling. Because you won't need water to break your fall. Because you take less fall damage. Okay, so these are two boot enchantments, which I am just learning now because I never really knew if Feather Falling worked on leggings or not, but either way, these are both fun enchantments. With Depth Strider actually being surprisingly useful because it does increase your swimming speed as well as your normal water walking speed. Feather Falling is also great because I don't like dying from falls. I mean, that might be top 5 most annoying ways to die in Minecraft for me. Okay, but which enchantment is better? Well, Depth Strider is good because even if you're not working directly in a large body of water, it still allows you to move faster within flowing water. So if you've ever been in that annoying scenario where you're going up in a cave and you're trying to get past that big stream of water, well, Depth Strider's got you covered. And for Feather Falling, since Protection already reduces damage, Feather Falling isn't really anything unique. So I think surprisingly, Depth Strider is advancing. Now a big one, Knockback versus Sharpness, two sword enchantments, with one of these being an absolute essential enchantment for almost any respectable sword. First looking at Knockback though, it's really a 50-50 on whether or not when you see this enchantment, you'll either be exclaiming a hearty yay or a depressed nay. Because Knockback isn't for everyone. A lot of the time it will do nothing but ruin your ability to quickly kill mobs, since every time you hit something with Knockback, they get flung into the next dimension. But still, Knockback definitely has its place and is by no means a bad enchantment. But compared to Sharpness, come on now, Sharpness is just a beloved enchantment. Yeah, it might be basic, but that doesn't make it any less good. Sharpness is what Smite and Bane of Arthropods wants to be, and will probably be quite the competition for the other enchantments it has to verse later in this video. So for all that, Sharpness easily advances. Next up, Mending versus Unbreaking, a huge one here because these are two universal enchantments that basically do the same thing. Unbreaking of course makes things unbreak, and Mending repairs your item's durability whenever you collect experience orbs. These are just two insanely useful enchantments, and the fact that I have to choose one over the other is criminal, but I will, and for that, Mending is just a better version of Unbreaking. I mean, all you have to do is slaughter a turtle or two, and you got yourself items that have unlimited durability, so shockingly, Unbreaking is eliminated and Mending will be advancing. And now to complete the first round, we have Silk Touch versus Silk Touch. Yeah, because there's 39 enchantments and 39 being an odd number, that means one enchantment had to get a free pass to the next round, and I chose Silk Touch to get that free pass. So with all that, we now move on to ranking all the advanced enchantments against each other, and it gets pretty wild from here on out, so you'll definitely want to watch till the end to see who wins. Alright, here we go. First we got Efficiency versus Punch. Which one is better? better. These are both great enchantments, but I feel like I could end this comparison in one sentence. Punch is for bows and efficiency is for all tools. So because efficiency doesn't discriminate, punch will be eliminated and efficiency will be advancing. Next is looting versus projectile protection. So projectile protection is great, and skeletons are the hardest common mob. But I mean, who's really getting projectilely projected enough to need this enchantment that badly? Meanwhile, looting is easily a top 3 sword enchant, so looting definitely advances. Now quick charge versus fire protection. So if you remember earlier, I wasn't too impressed by quick charge and it just barely advanced. Meanwhile, fire protection didn't have too much competition since it was versing Curse of Binding, but still, either way, fire protection is a good enchantment, especially if you're in the nether, and basically what I'm saying is that fire protection is advancing. Sorry, quick charge. Alright, next is fire aspect versus lure, and I really don't know which one should advance. I mean, I want to say fire aspect because it seems more useful in most circumstances, but the flame enchantment exists for bows, which basically does the same thing as fire aspect. But then you could also say the same thing for lure and luck of the sea, but I gotta make a choice here. So I think that because not everyone is a fisherman, but everyone uses swords, I'll go with fire aspect to advance. Next up, swift sneak versus impaling. Now these are two, in my opinion, very low tier niche enchantments. Like, I really don't know how many situations outside of the warden where swift sneak would be useful enough to put it on your boots permanently. And for impaling, it could be like the sharpness for tridents if your world was only oceans. But it's not. Land exists, these things exist, and you'll probably want to be fighting more mobs than just ones in the water. But I still can't see any good use for swift sneak, so impaling advances. Now, infinity versus aqua affinity. I didn't put these two together on purpose, but we'll roll with it. So anyway, to me, this comparison might be the easiest choice on this list. I mean, aqua affinity is just a great enchantment. One of the best water-based enchantments. In fact, I don't want to spoil anything here, but it might end up being the best enchant. Yeah, infinity's advancing. Next. Alright, now smite versus thorns. So I always thought thorns was cool. I mean, you could just stand there, not do anything, and have this enchantment kill the enemies for you. But if you've ever used thorns, that's really just a fantasy version of what this enchantment actually is. In reality, thorns only has a chance to do some real damage, and it also drains your armor way quicker than normal. Also, if you're close enough for mobs to be consistently hitting you, then you shouldn't be relying on thorns to kill them. You should be running. Now, as for smite, well, I actually kind of like this enchantment, which I know is an unpopular opinion, but a lot of the mobs it affects are ones you're killing very frequently, like skeletons, zombies, and even the wither. Well, not that you're killing the wither all that frequently, unless you are, I don't know. But either way, smite is good, but while smite is good, sharpness exists, which does smite's job better, so because of that, and because thorns is more unique, and by no means a totally bad enchantment, I think thorns will be advancing, and smite will be getting eliminated. Next up, loyalty versus protection. Now, I spoke pretty highly of loyalty when I compared it earlier. I just think it's that enchantment, but now it's facing protection, and that's a whole nother tier of quality. And look, I know everyone wants an underdog story. You know, the small and underappreciated loyalty beats the big and powerful protection. Well, that's not happening. Anyway, protection advances. Alright, next we got Depth Strider versus Sharpness, and I gotta say, coming into this ranking, I didn't think Depth Strider would make it this far, so I really did grow an attachment to Depth Strider that I never thought I would have had before. And although now I'll always love Depth Strider, I know that you guys would absolutely roast me if I picked it over Sharpness. But you know what? I don't care. I don't care. This is my tournament. This is my ranking. I choose who I want. Yeah, that's right. You know what? I'm choosing sharpness. I'm choosing sharpness to advance. I mean, who am I kidding here? And finishing off the second round here, which, wow, went by really quick, we have Mending versus Silk Touch. Two absolutely incredible enchantments, and while Silk Touch might have gotten a free pass last round by technicality, this time it's facing some serious competition, because Mending is considered one of the best enchantments in the entire game. Although I guess most of the enchantments that made it this far are all considered some of the best. But either way, looking at Silk Touch, this is a great enchantment that doesn't just help you, but is even required to obtain certain items in the game. But for that exact same reason, Silk Touch is not everyone's cup of silk, I don't know, because it turns your pickaxe from a mining device into like an item collector that won't even let you gather some simple diamonds if you find them. Silk Touch is definitely necessary for specific actions, but it's just too niche. Now, Mending on the other hand is useful anytime on any occasion for pretty much any item. So while I do like Silk Touch, it's getting eliminated, and Mending definitely advances. So with that, we move on to the next round, and we're getting real close to the winner here, so leave a comment on which enchantment you think will win. Anyway, now the first comparison of the next round is efficiency versus looting. Now I view looting similar to Silk Touch in a way, because they're both more niche enchantments. Definitely less so for looting, but it's not as universal as efficiency. I mean, efficiency is efficiency. It's the tool enchantment, so I don't think I'm surprising anyone when I say that looting will be eliminated and efficiency will be advancing. Next up, fire protection versus fire aspect. Sort of funny how both these enchantments ended up in the same comparison all this time later. Anyway, fire protection is good. In fact, I think it's the best of the specific armor trifecta. And when I say specific armor trifecta, I'm of course referring to the famous projectile, blast, and fire protection trifecta that I just made up. But while fire protection might be a big fish in a small pond, fire aspect is a good enchantment in a pond. I just think it's better than fire protection. Fire aspect advances. Now, infinity versus impaling, and I'll just keep this one short. Impaling is alright, but I'm really not too sure how it got this far in the tournament. Either way, there's just no comparing these two. Sorry impaling, but infinity clears every time. Infinity advances. Next we got thorns versus protection, as in the normal protection, none of that trifecta business. And well, again, this isn't too much of a comparison. Thorns didn't exactly blow its previous comparison smite out of the water, and now it's facing protection, so thorns will be eliminated and protection will be easily advancing. Alright, so those last two are pretty easy to decide, right? Well, now that streak is coming to an end, because for this last comparison of round 3, it's between sharpness and mending. Wow, I can only imagine that 50% of you are saying that this is an easy choice for one of these enchantments, and 50% of you are saying the same thing for the other one. And I can totally see why you would pick either one of these enchantments to advance, but I have to pick just one of these. And for that, it has to be simply because it's so universally useful, it's mending. That's right, mending is advancing and sharpness is eliminated. Wow, alright, things are heating up and we are down to only 5 enchantments left. And these are not the ones I thought would have ended up here, but these are the ones that prevailed. The ones that avoided elimination and rose almost to the top of this tournament, but only one can win, and which one will it be? Well, let's not waste any time and get into the final couple comparisons, starting with efficiency versus fire aspect. Look, I like fire aspect. Not having to smelt meat is nice, but efficiency is just a little too efficient. But yeah, this is a no-brainer. Fire aspect is being eliminated and efficiency advances. Next is infinity versus protection, and guys, I really like infinity, but I think it's more of a personal opinion since I don't like wasting arrows and infinity fixes that. But I know that deep down, objectively, protection is just the better enchantment. In fact, it's the best armor enchantment out there, so infinity will be getting eliminated and protection advances. Alright, that concludes that round, and now we move into the final round, but we run into a little problem. You see, because of the amount of enchantments and how the tournament ranking worked, I ended up having one enchantment that didn't have another to be ranked against. So because of that, this last round, I had to choose one enchantment to get a free pass to advance. And for that enchantment, I decided to choose mending, and you'll see why soon. So now we come to our final 3 enchantments: efficiency, protection, and mending. I didn't know whether or not to pick the winner out of these 3 enchantments or eliminate one of them and then choose between the final 2. So I thought about it and decided I will eliminate one of these and choose between the final 2. And for that, I will be comparing efficiency versus protection and have mending auto advance to the finals. So now efficiency versus protection, 2 useful enchantments truly, but when I think about it, there really is only one obvious choice. Efficiency is good for mining faster and protection is good for keeping you safe, but in this new age of Minecraft when everyone is carrying shields, protection is simply not as powerful as it once was, and for that, I am picking efficiency to advance. Protection, you are eliminated. I mean, you could find just a million ways to avoid death, but you could never force a block to mine faster, no matter how hard you try. And with that, we now move on to the final 2 enchantments, efficiency versus mending. 37 enchantments have been eliminated, and these 2 were left standing in the wake of the carnage, shining like the enchanted glow they exude. They have made it this far on their own, from beginning as far apart as possible to now having to face each other in the final bracket. Alright, enough talk. Here we go. Efficiency, you are great for your time-saving possibilities. You keep us from getting bored and help us as players progress faster than we ever could on our own. And mending, you prevent our gear from breaking, from shattering back into the sticks and materials it was crafted from. With only a little bit of experience, you keep our dreams intact. But one of you must go, and I will be deciding that right now. Right now, between efficiency and mending, the winner for the best enchantment in all of Minecraft is... Mending! Mending is the winner for the best enchantment tournament. Look, efficiency, you are great, but you could only be put on tools. Meanwhile, mending is even better and can be put on nearly anything and everything. That's right, thank you everybody for watching. Subscribe! Congratulations to Mending for winning the Best Enchantment Tournament. Now, the only thing that would make Mending better is if it could mend my freedom, because I was forced to make this video.